Everybody, welcome to Thursday. Can't post messages. Thursday, March 14th, and it's really good to be here with all of you guys. I am going to be talking about some specific topics today, and I'm hoping that these topics are topics that you will find some, support for your trading and for your life. At the end of the day, I truly am a believer in how you do one thing is how you do everything. So I do feel that a lot of traders go into trading not thinking through that how they are navigating their life emotionally is worth looking at, because if traders really start to become, connected or aware of where they have limiting beliefs personally, then they will be able to, right from the get-go, look at where they are probably going to have some hurdles to cross in their trading. Aloha, SN. I'm glad you're here. I love the Hawaiian flowers. Thank you for those. So my name is Kim Ann Curtin, guys, also known as the Wall Street Coach. I live in Hawaii, former New Yorker, moved to Hawaii about 10 years ago. I volunteered my coaching. I did live coaching outside the stock exchange during the 2008 crisis, the banking crisis. And, I was just in the right place at the right time and saw the need and thought I could be a contribution. And because of that, one of the reporters that saw me down there sitting on my cement bench outside the stock exchange on the corner of Broad and Wall Street in New York City, came over and, interviewed me and did a story about me. And in that article, he called me the Wall Street Coach. And I was like, hey, that's a pretty good name. I think I will run with it. And that, God, was such a long time ago. And I've since trademarked it. So that's how the Wall Street Coach came about. Somebody else named me. I did not name myself. Good to see you too, Tina. I'm so glad you're here. And just excited to be here. I think we're on Instagram today, hopefully. My amazing editor, Kurt, helped me troubleshoot today to make sure this restream is working. So today, what we're going to talk about is a couple of topics that I've, put out there already. I put a bunch of shorts this week out there about getting more comfortable with failure, why that's really important for traders. FOMO, what happens when FOMO is constantly showing up in your trading and when self-doubt is constantly coming up in your trading. Discipline, why that's so important for a trader. Your relationship to money, be it being driven to take trades outside of your strategy because you start to feel greedy, down to being afraid to take any risk because you are coming from a place of scarcity. These are all the things we're gonna take up. Bryce, the slice, I have to tell you, I don't remember you, but I'm sure that you will help enlighten me as time goes on. So those are going to be the topics today. But of course, you guys at any point can put a trading challenge that you're having. Remember, I'm going to be coaching you guys on emotional intelligence. I'm going to share tools that have served me on the journey of, life. And because I have worked with a lot of traders over all these years, I've been a coach now almost 18 years. I've seen a lot of traders go through, the same thing over and over again. And what I do know is that in a lot of ways, I feel the market holds up a mirror to traders, forcing them to be with perhaps, some of the shadows that they have within themselves that they haven't addressed. I think the market and working, as a trader is kind of the best school of enlightenment you could ask for. So the question is, are you going to take what it reflects back to you and do the heavy lifting, do the deep work inside? For anybody here who's a big fan of cars, you would not get a gorgeous Maserati and neglect the under the hood, right? You would be sure to use the best of all of the qualities that you want to put in there, like the best oil. You would be sure to be checking the water fluids, right? You'd have a dashboard probably telling you all the things that need to be checked all the time. You have to see yourself as a vehicle. You have to see yourself also like, are you going to put the cheap, crappy gas in the tank of you? Or are you going to make sure that you get, the premium quality? All of your thoughts, in addition to your nourishment, in addition to your sleep, in addition to the lifestyle you live, are contributing all the time. And the key is, you also have your thoughts contributing to your mindset. It's very easy, based on the life you guys have all come from, to be stuck in patterns that perhaps no longer served you. They could have served you really dramatically well when you were young, but that doesn't mean they're serving you now. And that is really part of, the journey of waking up, right? The journey of taking, so to speak, the blue pill in the matrix, right? You can go back to kind of being somewhat asleep, or you can choose and take this opportunity you have as a trader to start to become much more self-aware. Now, part of what I suggest to every client that I work with is for you to become self-aware and for you to look at perhaps some of the hard to look at things about yourself, your limiting beliefs, the stories you have, the way you self-sabotage. You're going to have to be sure to not have judgment about this. Part of why it's so hard usually for people to do work on themselves is because they already have these inner saboteurs or inner gremlins that make them be mean to themselves. Those inner saboteurs, inner critics is another word for them, has a tendency to beat the living daylights out of themselves. And when you're listening to all of that crap and garbage about yourself all the time, it's really hard to have to endure that. So one of the first things that I recommend is that clients start by reading a very powerful book called Taming Your Gremlin. The subtitle is A Surprisingly Simple Method to Get Out of Your Own Way. That book was game-changing for me on my personal journey when I realized, all those things that I'm listening to isn't my own voice. It's actually this inner saboteur who is making me feel like garbage. So if your inner voice repeatedly makes you feel like garbage, I can promise you guys that's not really your voice. It's an inner gremlin or inner saboteur that has been birthed by the circumstances you come from. Now, Rick Carson is the author of this book. He also was a guest on my podcast. I would strongly recommend you check that podcast out because he calls it also the monster of the mind. And he feels like for any of us who don't really get clear on what the monster of that mind is saying, we are definitely more in jeopardy to be swayed by its commentary, so to speak. And look, there was just a study that got released yesterday that talked about there are people who don't have that inner dialogue. God bless them, but that is not me. And in 18 years of coaching people, maybe it's only the people with the inner dialogue that come into coaching, but I have yet to meet somebody without an inner dialogue. And most times what I discover, and to be honest, the inner dialogue is not helping matters. So, but apparently there are these people that don't have it. And boy, that must be a really quiet place to live. All right, so again, remember, if there's anything you guys want to have coaching on, please feel free to put it in the chat box. Hopefully you guys can see the chat box. Also, take a look here. This is my almost weekly email for how to stop, self-sabotaging in your trading and your life. I put the link to that newsletter here right at the top, and I'll put other links as we go forward. So at any point, though, please put in the chat what you want me to talk about. But as I try to every week, I do this almost every week. Next week, P.S., I won't be able to do this, but almost every Thursday now. We were doing it on Wednesdays, but it seems like Thursdays is a better option. I usually do them in the neighborhood of 8 p.m. Eastern. All right, Eric is asking for something to be addressed. Selling too soon is still a problem. Had a 3-minute trade today. Hit my goal. I was fine with it until 20 minutes later it ran. So it helps, but doesn't eliminate where to go next. So Eric, just let me see if I can get clarity here. So you hit your goal. I guess I'm kind of curious. Once you hit your goal, did you come out of the trade? It sounds like, I think that's what I need to know. What's the issue here? I hear that you're asking for advice about like kind of the mental mindset, but about what specifically? I'm kind of curious, like, was your strategy to let it run, or did you not follow your strategy? That's what I need clarity about. Okay, so in the meantime, until you tell me that, we're going to take on the first topic I said that I would address today, which is why it's so important to get comfortable with failure. Because of the culture that we live in, because of academia, because most of us are coming from a US-based school system that has put an emphasis on being right. We have all this bias that being right is somehow the best thing we could be. And so especially those who come from that kind of a culture, that kind of a mindset, I think more than anybody, those who come from that and go into trading really struggle especially in the beginning, with this concept of failure. I think what happens a lot of times is that traders have a tendency to collapse their identity with that loss. And that is a very dangerous thing to do. Okay, Eric, I'll answer it then in 1 second. The key here, guys, and there's an assessment that I offer traders. I'm just going to, put that link here because it's such a, specific issue for traders. Is this particular score that gets measured in this trading positioning index is one particular score on the sell side that is about role identity. And this is where, for traders, it can get very dangerous. If you have a very strong connection to being a trader, for example, if what you do, maybe you're a trader, maybe you're a dad, maybe you're a mom, maybe you're a partner, maybe you have another position that you work at, or you're a designer, let's say I'm a coach. Whenever any of us overly identify with what we do, we can be at jeopardy of having a difficult time with failure. Because if our sense of who we are is tied to that which we do, that is when failure becomes even more difficult to be with, because we feel as though it is somehow a reflection of our value, a reflection of our worth. Now, if you are making a mistake in your trading account and it's repetitive, then I can understand that frustration. But the key here is, how are you going to cope with the inevitability of a great deal of loss if you want to trade for years or decades? That is a huge part of the journey. And if you don't find a way to emotionally be able to stomach those failures in as neutral a way as possible, you're going to be constantly swimming upstream. Being a trader is hard enough. You don't want anything that makes it harder. So that's what I want you guys to think about. Are you overly identifying with being a trader? And is that possibly contributing to why those failures are so hard? Are you taking it personally? You have to also realize if you're a trader who's trading less than 5 years, in a lot of ways, you're still a novice. In a lot of ways, you're still learning. So if you want to get better and you find yourself making mistakes that you feel at this point you should not be making, you've got to ask yourself, is the timeline that I am holding myself to, is it appropriate? Am I asking of myself something that's completely inappropriate, especially for part-time traders who are juggling, a full-time job, maybe a family, maybe caretaking for elderly parents, like fill in the blank. This is also something that shows up on that trader positioning index. Are your ambitions, are your goals for yourself in this galaxy? Nothing wrong with having bodacious goals, but if you are coming up with these crazy expectations for yourself, that too is going to make a failure sting much stronger. Because if you think you should have already arrived when for anybody else, that would not, it's like saying, what is today, Thursday? I'm going to be in an Ironman this weekend. Like, oh, really? Have you been training, prepping? No, like that. And coming in first in an Ironman this weekend, that would be an unreasonably high expectation of yourself. So I want you to think about that. Are you actually looking at your goals neutrally? Or are you just making up a fantasy of what you want it to be because you want the money, because you want to quit your job, because you want XYZ? But you got to remember, you have to base this in reality. And if you're not in reality, you have to get curious about what that's about. Because if you're not in this reality, even with a goal that is going to stretch you, you also are going to sabotage yourself because you're asking something that's inappropriate of yourself. All right, so let me get back here to Eric. Eric said followed the strategy, but had FOMO 20 minutes later. So the trade was over, and then you started to feel like you missed out because if you had stayed, you would have walked away with more cash. Is that right, Eric? I think that's what you're saying. So the FOMO likely, and we're going to go right into the topic of FOMO. Please ask any questions you guys have about what I just said. But here's the thing about FOMO. FOMO happens because one is in a mindset of scarcity. One is focused on what you don't have. You've heard this phrase, this is a person who is a glass half empty kind of person. That not only is a way of life, is sometimes, gotcha, Eric. So what you want to do in that moment, about the FOMO is it's likely being triggered by an inner gremlin that starts to tell you, see, if you had stayed in, you could have made all this money. Well, first of all, if you stayed in, I don't think you would have been following your trading strategy. So you got to identify what these inner critics are saying to you guys. You want to catch them and write them down, because most of the time they are lying. They are giving you misinformation. And if you listen to what these inner critics, inner saboteurs say without actually hearing it, you can easily get swayed into thinking, whatever it is they present to us. This is why it's so important to identify what those inner critics are saying to us. And that's a big part of Rick Carson's book, is identifying the catchphrases and also identifying the circumstances that kick them up, that kick up their, collection of stories. We have to remember that often what we do whenever something around us, triggers that inner gremlin, we have to realize that it is only presenting one agenda, so to speak. Here's the other thing, Eric, that could have happened had you stayed in. You could have lost everything, all those gains. So, you got to realize that the gremlin isn't presenting you with a neutral collection of things that could have happened. It is being very specific in what it's presenting to you and triggering FOMO. Like, don't forget JOMO, the joy of missing out. That is also something that you want to start to trigger for yourself. There maybe was more money for you to be had, but if you didn't follow your strategy, you certainly could have lost your money. And here's the thing you want to be proud of, the thing you want to lean in on, is the fact that you are a man of your word. Like, that is the most critical piece of this entire journey. When traders don't trust themselves, you are in the most jeopardy of all. So, Eric, that you even got tempted by that thought is completely inappropriate, because it would have taken you out of being true to your strategy. So that is like the most ridiculous thing a gremlin could say to you, because what you want to measure yourself by every day as a trader is, are you being a man of your word or a woman of your word? Are you following the strategy you have designed? You have spent hours creating. You have spent so much screen time to prepare. This is so key, guys. There are traders out there who have these strategies and never fucking follow them. What the hell? You have to follow them, not because anybody else is watching, but you are watching. You know, the concept of the card game solitaire, you can cheat, at solitaire, but who are you cheating? Who are you kidding? You're cheating yourself. Every time you guys come up with a strategy and you do not stay true to it, you are betraying yourself, guys. You are absolutely just completely cutting your knees off, because if you don't trust you, you will never be able to trust anybody. The relationship you have with yourself, guys, is the most important relationship. The most important quality you guys want to have when you're trading is self-respect. And the only way you're going to have self-respect is if you are true to your strategy. This I cannot emphasize enough. I would want you all to be more horrified at you coming away from your strategy, because you're more interested in just making some extra cash than the fact that you leave that cash on the table being true to your strategy. This is not a short-term gain. If you're constantly looking at that one trade like, oh, well, I lost some money, I could have had more, like, that tells me, Eric, your eyes are completely in the wrong place. Your eyes, your ruler needs to be measuring, was I true to my strategy? And that great quote, which I've said 100 times, and I'll say it 100 more, from Peter Brand, from Jack Schwager's Unknown Market Wizard book, is there are bad trades and there are losing trades. You have to know the difference. yes, maybe if you had stayed in there, you could have made more money. But if you had betrayed your strategy just for a quick drive-by, that would still have eaten away at the concept of you being true to your strategy. So you say it's not the money, and yet it's the money that you were feeling triggered around FOMO. So I think you really have to take a look at your values. You're valuing that little bit of extra that you could have made over the fact that you were true to your strategy, that you have self-respect now for staying true to your strategy. That is very, important. The people who abandon their plan and trade momentum, 80% of chat rooms do this, follow the leader. But Eric, it's none of your business what these other traders do. That's, I'm saying that to you, but I'd say that to anybody. Who cares? Who cares what they do in other chat rooms? It's none of your business. What's your business is the relationship you have with yourself and your strategy. Doesn't matter what anybody else does. This happens a lot, guys. It's very easy to focus on other traders, be it the chat rooms you're in, be it Twitter, be it X, be it this, be it that, be it colleagues, be it Discord rooms. Like, it doesn't matter, guys. Like, you want to learn from other traders? Fine. Be discriminatory in who you're learning from. What you need to do is build a completely trustworthy relationship with you. You have to know what your triggers are. You have to know where you're potentially insecure. You have to know where you have a tendency to doubt yourself. You have to know if you're being motivated by just a drive-by, cash grab. If that motivates you, you guys got to take a really hard look at yourself, because then you're telling yourself and you're telling us in this little space that you are more interested in just making a lot of money fast and not being a professional trader. You would be then more of a gambler. And if you're going to be a gambler, at least call yourself a gambler. Don't pretend to yourself or the world that you are a trader, because you are not. You're lying to yourself. All right, Micah, I see your questions here. Let me get here. Okay, so Eric, so what mentality needs to get stronger? I don't think it's mentality. I think, Eric, you have to take a hard look at yourself, at the values you have, because right now with that, FOMO only happens if you value making that little extra more than you value you being a man of your word. I would say you need to look at what is it that monetary, more that you would have made in that moment is something that you are upset missing out on, instead of being really proud of yourself for staying true to your strategy. That's what I would say you want to look at. All right, Micah says, not sure if you remember, but I'm also on the Big Island. I've been having trouble finding the time to do all the trade studying. I have a full-time job, 3 kids. I work 10 hours per day running a 5-man electrical crew, and trading or studying stocks about 6 hours a day. I find some stupid. So I have to tell you, Micah, you can't study anything for 6 to 8 hours a day if you are raising children and have a full-time job, never mind your own business. Of course, you're going to make mistakes from a lack of sleep. I don't know that you have to manage your time better. I think you have to manage your expectations. You're running a business. You are working full-time. You have to have sleep. Micah, there's no way around this. Here's the thing. Even if you want to trade full-time, eventually it's going to take time, Micah. You cannot take your body, a vehicle, and drive it into the ground, which it sounds like you are doing, and expect it to be able to deliver premium results. So what I would suggest is that you cut back on the time you study, cut back on your trading. I know that's probably not what you want to hear. I know that probably makes you upset, but you've got to manage your expectations. To be putting that kind of pressure on yourself, that to me sounds like an inner gremlin to begin with. You're asking something of yourself that is not realistic. Now, I am all about being somebody who takes on bodacious goals, but bodacious goals is one thing. Asking yourself to actually not be human is another. So, Mike, that is way too much. 40, 50 hours at a job, and then asking yourself on top of that to not sleep, not have probably time with your family, never mind white space, days off. You need at least one day off. You need at least an afternoon off. I get that this is probably motivated by your desire to be able to be a bigger contribution to your family. I bet you probably love trading, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you continue to stay on that kind of trajectory, you're just going to burn yourself out, and you're going to burn probably a bunch of bridges. I would much rather see you manage these expectations, come up with a pragmatic calendar of what it looks like. It could be that there are days or weeks where you can't spend as much time studying as you would like, and this could take you longer than you wanted to, but that's okay. Like, what is this big rush that you have to put yourself to such the corner? Like, you're putting yourself in such a corner, Micah. That concerns me, because you have to realize you're a human being. You're not an AI robot, for God's sakes. Find a way to manage these expectations, and maybe check out the Taming Your Gremlin book, because it's possible, Micah. You can be a hard worker. You can be somebody who's not going to give up. All of those are admirable traits. But once it starts to go into a place where you're telling me you're not getting like more than 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, you're not also then going to be present to those kids who undoubtedly love you and need you to be their dad. So being a trader is fantastic, but you're going to have to manage how and when you do that from a very moderate perspective, because it sounds to me right now that what you're doing to yourself is self-sabotage, right? You are going to sleep through your alarm because your body needs to have at least 7 hours of sleep every night. It actually needs probably closer to 8. Cognitively, you have to realize that your brain is being taxed to such a degree that it's going to be compromised. You guys have to see yourselves as Olympians. Now, you're working full time, Micah. That alone is asking for so much of you cognitively, and then you're not giving your brain any time. You just listen to a handful of episodes of Andrew Huberman, guys. Just listen to a handful of any of these different scientific studies about what the cognitive load is. In the podcast interview that I did with Celeste, what was her name? Celeste Headley. Her book is called Do Nothing. That's a book you might want to read, Micah. And in that book, she says, we max out. Listen here, guys. We max out cognitively at 4 hours. 4 hours. Our brain, heavy load thinking, heavy load cognitive, being strategic, maxes out at 4 hours, guys. That means you are going to have to listen to that. You're going to be compromised after 4 hours. And Micah, you're basically telling me you want to be able to handle roughly 16 to 18 hours of a cognitive load, which leaves you how much time to let your brain rest. I just had another author on my podcast, Maggie Jackson. She wrote a book called Uncertain, The Wisdom and Wonder of Being Unsure. And she has scientific study after scientific study that specifically talks about how our brain actually doesn't just work at incoming information. After incoming information comes in, what she says is that the brain is beginning to take that information and put it into files that best suited so that it can all be kind of weaved into how we use it. And what she discovered in the journey that she went on, because she visited, all these scientific labs and saw the research, basically what she discovered is that even just a couple of minutes, 4 minutes after receiving information, that a person will retain the data way longer than a person who moves on to another task. So let's just say, Micah, if you have just spent an hour, let's say, or, a half hour studying something, what she's trying to suggest is that, or the scientific study suggests, you sit and do nothing. You don't take notes. You don't reiterate the information to yourself. You don't try to strategically think it through or remember. You actually do nothing. You just look out the window and let yourself daydream. And because of that, your brain is doing the work it needs to do. I can't recommend that book enough, guys. It blew me away. I took, I think, over maybe 240 highlights in that Kindle book. I really prefer books over a Kindle, but because she was coming on the podcast, I had to get the Kindle to get ready for the interview. And I have to be honest with you guys, it is a profound read. The scientific studies she relates to, and because traders seemingly are so uncomfortable with uncertainty, this is a big part of why I had her on my podcast. Watch the interview with her. After that interview, also there's an X Space. I did an X Space with her also just a week ago, and that's a 30-minute conversation. Listen to that too, because she talks about different things in that conversation versus the podcast. So we just dropped that. Check it out. After you listen to it, I have to say I strongly recommend you consider that book. It's called Uncertain. And why uncertain? For most of us, we think uncertainty is weakness. It means we don't know. And part of what that book shows us is that actually in the midst of uncertainty, just think about a trade that you guys have had in the past. In the midst of uncertainty, what happens is our brain realizes, wait a minute, this is different. This is not familiar. I better go into fifth gear. Whereas in the past, we have been, thinking, oh, uncertainty isn't going to be an appropriate place to be. Actually, she talks, there's a whole study about surgeons, and that surgeons say the complications, the trouble that goes down in a surgery, guess when it always happens for surgeons? They said in the bread and butter cases, in the cases and surgeries that they've done hundreds, if not thousands of times. Why? Because they're on autopilot. They're coasting. And I want you guys to think about that as traders. Think about the trades you always take, the ones you're not really cognitively thinking about. Those are the ones where you're going to potentially be not paying attention. And that's why uncertainty actually lights up regions of our brain that makes our brain pay more attention. And that's why uncertainty, I feel, is something that traders need to get more comfortable with and to see what they represent. All right, let's see what Micah here. I have no idea how to do nothing. I literally don't know how. The closest I come to that is watching a movie with my fiance once a week. But I hear you, Kim. Thank you for advice. All right, so Micah, that tells me that it's possible when you attempt to rest. Attempt to do nothing. Likely you have a choir of inner saboteurs who start to shame you and make you feel like you're lazy or that you're doing something bad or doing something wrong. So I think, Mike, it's possible you have some inner saboteurs that are afoot in the midst of doing nothing. And I want you to watch, at a minimum, Celeste Headley's conversation with me on my podcast. Just go into YouTube and type Celeste Headley and Kim and Curtin, and you're going to find the episode. That is going to be eye-opening. And then if you're willing to, Micah, I'm going to suggest you read her book, Do Nothing. It also is jam-packed with the scientific evidence of how doing nothing actually facilitates us operating at a much higher level. Now, this is all counterintuitive, guys, because what is our culture constantly emphasizing? Especially, I have to be honest, guys, the biggest thing that drives me crazy is the grind culture. This grind it out. It's so sabotaging. It is not what you guys need. And that is part of what so many people are listening to and thinking something is wrong with them. All right, look, I'm a big reader, Mike, and don't freak out because I'm going to talk about another book. You don't have to read all these books. You can just pick the one that resonates with you. But here's the other book that I want to speak to, Micah. It's called Never Enough: When Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic and What We Can Do About It. Okay, guys, do you see that? This is our culture right now. This is what so many people are addicted to. I'm going to just call it what it is, guys. This achievement culture is an addiction. Addictions come in all sizes and shapes, but this concept of never enough, we're never doing enough, we're never learning enough, we're not, working enough, Micah. Like, this achievement culture is so to an extreme. And I know people say, oh, but Kim, there are people who are lazy in this. I have to tell you guys, I've been a coach for 18 years. I haven't met one client in 18 years who is lazy. Almost all of those clients have one thing in common, and that is the experience of not feeling like they're doing enough, living, their life like the way they should be, that they haven't achieved enough. Most people don't feel they've achieved enough. Most people feel they're not doing enough. Between the concept of, like, you have to eat really perfectly healthy, you have to exercise, you have to take the cold baths, you have to take the cold showers, you have to, listen to podcasts, you have to do this, you have to do that. Like, geez Louise, people, it's over the top. Who the hell can do all those things with a full-time job? If you have a partnership, if you got kids, and you're trying to do something on the side, like, come on. And what happens is everybody feels guilty because everybody else is seemingly doing it. I must be the only one who isn't doing it, right? Everybody thinks it's just them. No, people. Nobody's succeeding at this. So everybody's walking around feeling like crap all the time because they figure, oh, I'm just so undisciplined. Oh, I'm just so lazy. Oh, I must not care. I must not have self-esteem because I can't handle 4,003 check boxes every freaking single day. It's too much. It's too much. And I want you all to knock it off, because if you guys could just be a little bit more compassionate to yourself, just a little bit more empathetic to yourself, you would actually be able to have probably more success in the things that you take on, because you will be taking on a healthy balance. Life is not ever going to be 100% where we can just do this or this. It's a give and take. It's always going to be like those, remember those little scales in science class? Like, it was really hard to get it perfectly balanced. So you have to give yourself some empathy. You have to realize that it's hard to juggle all these things. And you have to ask yourself, if you're being constantly, here are the key words, Micah, you can listen to, and everybody who's here, would, should, or could. You have to. I should do this. I must do this. I have to. Should, would, could, have to, must. All of these are the words of a gremlin, constantly making us feel bad about things, constantly making us think like we're not doing enough. And this is very dangerous because it will constantly kind of leave you in a loop and in a circle. All right, enough about that, but hopefully, Micah, you got the point, and you will maybe just try to have a little bit more compassion on yourself. All right, so one of the things I did say that I would talk about today, and again, if anybody has anything they want to talk about or get coached on, please put it in the chat box. Let's talk about discipline. This is another thing that sometimes is kind of a branch off of this topic of, toxic achievement culture that we live in. And what I want to point out is that what I have noticed about discipline when people find themselves struggling with being disciplined, be it being true to your strategy, be it disciplined getting to the gym, be it to whatever, fill in the blank. Often what I find is that that is a person who is not connected to their basic needs, and they aren't getting some of their basic needs met. And if you are not getting some of your basic needs met, which I liken needs to oxygen, you are going to not really be in a position to stay true to the discipline. You are going to find it very difficult for your willpower to last. And willpower does have kind of like a max. There's a couple of different theories about willpower, but what I have seen repeatedly is that needs are like oxygen. And just like they tell us on the plane, if you are going to assist anybody with their oxygen mask, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, right? So if you guys start to think about your basic needs like you would oxygen, then you can start to see, oh, I see. The reason I'm probably not able to be disciplined is because I don't even have any oxygen in my tank. So let me get this link for you guys. I want you guys to sign up for, where is it here? Universal Needs List. All right, I'm going to put this in the chat box. I want you guys to get this. Let's see here. So this is the Universal Needs List. And in this list, you're going to be able to identify what your basic needs are. Now, let me just give you guys a little bit of clarity. What needs are not are wants. So, for example, if you want a Rolex, that is not a need. What that is a want. But underneath every single want, there lies a need. So if you guys were to guess what need might be underneath wanting a Rolex, could you guess what you think that might be? I'm just kind of curious if you guys are understanding the difference. What would be the need that's driving the want of the Rolex or the Maserati or, for a gal, a Louis Vuitton pocketbook? Like, what could be the need underneath the want? Anybody want to guess? Tina, if you're still here, you want to guess? Eric? Anybody, just put a guess in the chat box if you want. Respect. Let's say a guy starts working, with a collection of the traders, and he pulls into the parking lot, and everybody has a BMW. He probably will want a BMW, but let's say the guys invite him to golf, or they ask him out to come join them for a beer after work, or to go bowling with them. His need is what's truly driving that. The Rolex is just, I don't know so much security, Eric, as community, right? The watch probably represents respect, right? experiencing, fitting in. So that would be community, right? Respect, community, being included, right? A sense of belonging, right? So great guesses, guys, great guesses. This is what I want you guys to see, is that whenever any of us have a want, I want you to always be looking for what the need underneath is. And that you could do, even, Eric, for example, with that FOMO that showed up. Like, what ultimately was it you were missing out on? I would look at that needs list, which I put in the chat box, sign up for it. Every action any of us take, guys, is driven by one or more of these needs. And this is why it's so important for you to understand what they are, because in the midst of this list, which you'll see quite a number of needs, there's always going to be a collection of what I would call non-negotiable needs. Now I'm going to share one of my needs with you just for you to have a sense of it. Freedom is a non-negotiable need for me, right? So in professional or personal relationships, that's something I know if I don't have, I'm not going to be fully satisfied, not going to be fully comfortable. So I am a really good steward of that need now. I'm very conscious that I need freedom, and that if I don't have that, I'll probably experience these feelings: disappointment, apathy, frustration, maybe depression, maybe anger. This is what happens. Feelings that we have are flags to tell us, oh, I'm not getting needs met if we're having uncomfortable or unpleasant feelings. And when we start to have like peace, joy, equanimity, ease, laughter, like all of that is an indication that needs are being met. So the first step is recognizing what are the feelings that you're having the majority of time, and then track it back to the needs that were met or not met. And that begins your journey to, first of all, finding out what they are. You can't be a steward of them unless you know what they are to begin with. Once you know what they are, then you can become a better steward of getting them met. When you get them met, then you're going to find yourself having more energy, more oxygen in your lungs. And when you have more oxygen in your lungs and you're feeling your basic needs are getting met, that's when you will be able to lean into staying more disciplined. But what seems to be the case is that when discipline is a challenge for somebody, it's usually an indication that their basic needs are not getting met. I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again because it's a great example. That one trader that I spoke to in the middle of the pandemic, she was taking unusual risk in her trading account. She was, a decade into trading. She was not a novice. And she was like, why am I taking all this risk? And as we started to unpack it, what did we discover? She was a weekend warrior. She was somebody who loved adventure. She loved to have, those kind of like, climb mountains without being belayed or harnessed in, like jump out of planes. Like she was an adventurer, somebody who really took a great deal of risk in her weekend journeys, in her, weekend adventure trips. She had not been able to take them because of the lockdown. So she was trying to get that need met in her trading, because that was the place that she was spending more of her time. So her discipline around her relationship to risk was, out the window, because this basic need of hers for adventure wasn't getting met. Now, here's the thing, the lockdowns continued, right? She wasn't suddenly able to get that need met, but now she was conscious of it. Now she was aware. Now she could see, oh, I'm trying to get my need for adventure met in my trading. That's not going to be good for my account. And just by knowing what your need is, that alone sometimes is enough for you to not try to get it met in a costly way. It's not like, if you sign up and get that universal needs list, you're going to see that list and you're like, oh my God, Kim, there's so many things here I'm not having met. And I totally get that. And it's not about that all your needs are going to be met overnight, but being able to see what your needs are that aren't being met, that's going to kind of shift you into that hyper heightened state of awareness. And you will be less likely to try to get those needs met in your trading, guys, which is, ultimately what you don't want to do. Eric says some gremlins are hiding deep in the subconscious. Meditation, how much does that help? I struggle with meditation that actually works for me. I will point you towards 10% happier. 10% happier is also the name of Dan Harris's book. I think Dan Harris's app, 10% happier, is one of the best meditation apps out there. It takes into account the difficulty that people do have meditation in ways that I haven't seen others succeed at. Dan Harris also has a couple of talks that are fantastic online. One of them is a TED talk called How to Be Less of a Jerk to Yourself. I think that's the title of it. It's an excellent talk. I wouldn't worry about the gremlins that are deep in the unconscious, Eric. I would say just keep your mind on the ones that are present. Don't worry about those that are down deep inside. You'll get to those eventually. If you could just identify the ones that are very obvious, the voice that you hear that tells you, oh, you should now feel like you missed out because you didn't get that, extra little bit of money. Get that gremlin named. Get the ones that are obvious, the ones that are always showing up clearly in your head, making you feel crappy about yourself. Trust me, you get those guys named. You don't even have to worry about the other ones hiding deep inside. Just start where you're at with whatever those voices are, and that will have a huge impact on yourself. I do think meditation is worth it, but I do think for right now, it would serve you more to do the work around the Kremlin stuff, really dive into the book, really do the homework, really get curious, listen to Rick Carson. He's on my podcast and a bunch of other people's podcasts, and he has a bunch of free videos on his website, which I think is just taming your gremlin. So I would say just put your time for now on that, and, let yourself come back to meditation another time. But if you are looking for meditation that, perhaps is presented a little different, I like Dan Harris. I like his 10% happier approach. I love the subtitle to his book. It's called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics, which I think is the best title. And I think a lot of what Dan's experience for his own journey is very similar to what traders go through. Dan speaks about this in his TED Talk, that he was, a ABC Nightline correspondent, and he was under so much pressure, stress. He was being sent to war-torn countries. He was working kind of the kind of hours, Micah, you are like 20-hour days. He was being sent all over the place. He wasn't giving himself time to cope or process the violence he had seen. And he was, having to deliver on air in front of millions of people. Like, that's the kind of pressure I think a lot of traders experience too. That, they're different positions, but that sense of intensity, pressure, lots of money at stake, a lot of internal pressure. And basically, Dan was using drugs to cope. And the drugs, just began to take a toll on him to the point where he had 2 breakdowns on national television during 2 live ABC episodes. And that's when he was like, oh shit, I have to do something here. And that kind of started his journey to investigate whether meditation was actually, real. He considered himself a fidgety skeptic. He's like, this is bullshit. These spiritual teachers are all, up to no good. And, you just follow him as he begins to find his journey. And then, obviously meditation had such an impact on him that now he has a whole app dedicated to it. I think it's a free app for part of it. And then the rest of it, I think is about 100 or 125 for the year. I have that version because I think it's one of the best ones out there. So, okay, let's see. What haven't I talked about? I only have a few minutes left. Again, please remember, guys, to sign up for my newsletter. If you go to the start of the chat box, you'll see where you can do that. I also, a quick advertising break here, I have an acceleration course for traders that is going to start in April. I would love to see those who think it would serve them to come and join it. It's a small group. It will never be more than 10 traders. We talk about a lot of the topics I'm talking to you about, but we do a nice deep dive in for this to address how it's impacting your trading. The last two cohorts we had were just, phenomenal. And traders, spoke about like how much not only did it change their trading, but it's also obviously helping them outside of trading in their personal life. So I hope you consider it. There's the link. I put it in the chat box. The last topic we're going to talk about today that I said I would is about money, is about greed and scarcity. And what this topic, why I think this topic is so important. In fact, I was talking to a trader today who, one of the assessments that I love, that is a free assessment that's online, is one created by Olivia Mellon in her book, Money Harmony. And what she talks about is she kind of lets us all self-identify by answering some questions. And this particular trader's money type was a money monk. A money monk is a person who has the tendency to think that people who have a lot of money, very rich people, very wealthy people, might not be the nicest people. That the richer you are, perhaps the ruder you are. There's a whole set of beliefs about rich people that I have discovered sometimes traders have. And if you are harboring any kind of judgment about wealth, any kind of judgment about rich people, any kind of judgment about, millionaires or billionaires, if you have any kind of opinions or stories that paint those with negative kind of characteristics, then I want you guys to think about, would you potentially be more or less likely to not want to be a person like that, right? So in this conversation with this trader today, they realized that they do have judgments about rich people. You got to ask yourself, if you've got those, how the heck can you expect yourself to potentially become a rich person and, more importantly, stay rich, right? Plenty of people make a lot of money. Plenty of traders make a lot of money. And then what happens? Oh, they just unbelievably sabotage it. Oh, unbelievably lose it all or lose a lot of it. That, to me, is often because the internal hasn't caught up with the external. This is why we see athletes, superstars of any type, make all this money, and then within years, a period of time, they're down and out, going bankrupt, having some kind of financial hardship, having been talked into crappy deals, or family who said that they need the money. We also see this with movie stars or rock stars. We see people who get to the top of the mountain financially and then somehow find it slipping through their hands. This too happens if you haven't reconciled what your story is to money. What is your belief patterns around money? If you guys are in the business specifically around increasing your wealth, you have to really take a hard look at this. The other thing that is undoubtedly influencing traders, especially hardworking traders, are traders that think, this mentality of it's only elbow grease that can make money. Like if you're coming from a blue collar background or any kind of labor, if your family were laborers, right? These generations of laborers or blue collar workers. These are people who had to sacrifice their physical body to make money, right? Bricklayers, construction workers, like anything that required the physical body, that can become a belief that those who are not going down that particular path, like a trader, clicking buttons, screen time, sitting still at a desk for hours at a time, there can be a disconnect internally that you aren't working hard enough, right? But that isn't necessarily even your belief, but it could be a belief that's just been passed down. If you come from a family where they were physically making their money, it can feel incongruent to that belief system if you aren't physically making your money. You're making it very different here, right? Cognitively, pattern recognition, speed at which you're able to respond to a trade, emotional intelligence, so you're not triggered. These are skill sets that may or may not have been ones you saw in your household. So here's the thing. Everybody's going to be different, but you want to get very curious. What is your relationship to money? If money were a person and I interviewed money about you, what would money tell me? Would money tell me you're very cheap? Would money tell me that you always pick up the tab when you go to dinner with your friends? Would money tell me that you count, all your pennies and put them in a nice little stack at the end of the day? Like, I want you guys to think about, what are the stories you learned growing up about money? What are the beliefs you have about money? What is your relationship to scarcity? If you're coming from poverty, if you're coming from hardship, if you watched your mother, a single mother, struggle, you could have a very different relationship to money when you were a little kid than you do now. All of this needs to be examined. All of this just needs to be considered. You want to get clear on what that relationship to money is. Is it informed by a sense of scarcity? Is it informed by a sense of graspiness? Are you like holding a metaphor gun to your head, demanding that you make a certain amount of money in 3 months, 6 months, a year? All of these things are part of what you bring into your trading. And if you haven't done any work around the money, I do think that will cost you. So I'm going to give you a bunch of titles for you to consider. Not that you have to read all these books, guys. I just read a lot, so I talk about books a lot. What I recommend, especially if I'm on a tear and name a bunch of books, catch the title that sounds like the one for you. Go look at it on Amazon, look at the reviews, look at the description, and find one of the books that I mentioned that speaks to you, that you go, you know what, this is the one I think I should read. And if it doesn't serve you, then go get another one. Here are some of the books that were instrumental in helping me unpack my relationship to money. And let me tell you guys, I had one hell of a twisted relationship to money because I grew up into incredibly different households. One was with my mom, who was struggling to make ends meet. She would go to the supermarket, buy one roll of toilet paper. She would put $5 of gas in the car. Our car had no heat in a couple of winters because she couldn't afford to get the heat fixed. The brakes that were told to her to get replaced, she couldn't afford. And the brakes went out once while my mother was driving down a hill with my little sister in the car. Like, that's the kind of shit that, like, I remember always trouble with landlords who were always moving. Sometimes, she couldn't really get the groceries. Like, we got the church basket at Thanksgiving, that kind of stuff, right? And I also was experiencing going to my dad's house on the weekend sometimes, and I was having a radically different experience, which was one really of incredible luxury. So talk about a mind twist. Like, I've had to do so much work, and it's not like it's ever done, guys. I'm always having to be with this stuff that, I've lived through. But the key is just being able to be honest with yourself. Like, oh, look at all these stories I have about money. Look at all these stories I have about being poor. All these stories have about being rich. Like, what does it mean? What does it mean for me? Am I living with what other people say is success, or is it my definition of success? This is the kind of work that I have to advocate you guys consider doing. All right, so here's some book title. Money is Love by Barbara Wilder. A life-changing book for me. Very controversial title, I know, but I have to say, read it. The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist, an incredible book. That one really had a huge impact. T. Harv Eker's book, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, very powerful, helps you understand the temperature set point you're at with regards to money. And as soon as you start to make more than that, or you start to have less than that, you will find yourself being really triggered. He explains it in such a brilliant, powerful way. There's a new book of Jared Dillian's called No Worries. I love this book. He was on my podcast too, probably a month or two ago. Very powerful book. The Instant Millionaire by Fisher. That book also is kind of like a parable, but it's a really great book to help you understand how the story you tell yourself about money impacts your ability to create it or not. Money is energy, folks. So if you don't get that energy cleaned up, it's going to have its way. Another book that I really like, especially for those who perhaps have judgments about rich people or about having a lot of money or too much money or this, and this, is a book by DeMartini called How to Make One Hell of a Profit and Still Go to Heaven. Fantastic book. I had a couple of others here. I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head. What was that other one about money? I think it's called Money and the Meaning of Life. I can't remember the author, but that's an excellent book as well. I think that's enough, right? I've given you like 5 or 6 titles. There's other titles too I've read. And if you check out my book, which I'm going to just quickly do a shout out here, Transforming Wall Street, back there in the corner. I'm going to actually give you that website, Transforming Wall Street. Tomorrow is actually transformingwallstreet.com. So that's my book, guys. Tomorrow is its 9th anniversary. I released Transforming Wall Street, which in that book, I quote a lot of books, and I have like a 25-page bibliography of a whole bunch of books about money because they all inform what I wrote in Transforming Wall Street. But my book it's very expensive because I self-published it, and there's not that many copies left in a hardcover. So the price tag for the hardcover is like $200, which is crazy, but not gonna reprint it. But it's available as a Kindle for $20, whatever it is. But in that book, there's a lot about relationship to money. So maybe consider my book. So tomorrow's 9th anniversary. I self-published it 9 years ago on the Ides of March, which I can't even believe it's 9 years ago. But time flies when you're having fun. All right, I think I'm going to close it up. If there's no other questions, if you have one question, you've been holding it back, please put it in right now. But if you don't, that's okay. I'm not going to be able to be here next week, guys. I'm going to be in San Diego visiting with a client, and I will be back the following week. I hope this was helpful to everybody here. I hope these topics that you feel you have tools, I hope you'll sign up for that needs list, and I hope you'll consider the acceleration course, which will launch in April. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in, so I'm going to take my leave, and I just want to wish you guys to stay as neutral as possible in these next 2 weeks for yourself and for your trading. Please bring some self-compassion to the journey. Please be sure that you get at least aware. You're not going to ever get rid of them, but at least get aware of these inner saboteurs, these inner gremlins, because they are siphoning your gas tank. And I don't want to see that happen. All right, Tina, thank you. I'm glad it was good for you. And thank you for the good wishes for the trip. Daria, I'm so glad you're here. And I'm glad the tools have been helpful. All right, guys, be well. As we say in Hawaii, hui.